Lean in, friends. Closer. The fire is dying, and that is for the best. Light has a way of hiding the truth, but the dark is honest. You hear that sound outside? That rhythmic thump drag against the frost-cracked earth. Some of you think it's the wind. Some of you think it's the branches of the great ash scratching at the longhouse walls. It isn't. It is the sound of a debt being collected. It is the sound of a story that wasn't earned. You see me, your Jarl, with silver on my arms and silk at my throat, and you think, here is a man favored by the Norns. But this silver is lead in my pockets, and this silk feels like a shroud. I am going to tell you why the dead are knocking at our gates tonight. I am going to tell you about the silver-tongued devil named Eric the Skald, and the day he traded our village's peace for a song that was too beautiful to be true. It began 3 winters ago, after the raid of the Iron Isles. We had returned not as conquerors, but as broken men. We had failed, friends. We had met the coastal guard at Sundurvik, and we had turned tail. We didn't save the village of our kin. We didn't stand our ground. We watched from the safety of the fog as the longships of the southern raiders turned the horizon into a line of fire. We crept home like beaten curs, our hulls empty of gold and our hearts empty of pride. But a village cannot survive on shame. Shame is a rot that eats the grain and sours the ale. I summoned Eric. He was a young man then, with eyes that saw the world not as it was, but as it should be. I gave him a pouch of silver stolen from my own father's hoard, and I told him, Eric, make us brave. Give the mothers a reason to stop weeping. Give the men a reason to look at their wives again. I asked for a poem. I received a curse. That night, in this very hall, Eric stood by the fire. He didn't just sing, he wove. He sang of the victory of the crimson mist. He sang of how I, your Jarl, stood upon the prow of the sea stallion and cleaved the southern king's skull in 2. He sang of how our brothers, the ones we left to die in the surf, had actually held the line, fighting like Einherjar until the sea itself turned red with the blood of our enemies. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. As he spoke, the shame in the room vanished. The men straightened their backs. The women smiled. The ale tasted like honey again. Eric had lied, and we had all swallowed the lie like a draught of immortality. We fell asleep that night believing we were heroes. But words have weight, my friends. Especially words spoken in a hall where the ancestors are listening. For a year, the lie served us well. We grew fat on our false reputation. Other villages feared us. Traders gave us better prices because they believed we were the slayers of Sundurvik. Eric was treated like a god. He never had to lift a spear or a hoe. He just sat in the corner, refining the saga, adding more heroic deaths to the men who had actually died screaming for mercy in the mud. But then, the world began to tilt. It started with the livestock. The cows didn't just stop giving milk, they began to give something thick and gray, like liquid ash. Then came the birds. They stopped singing. They would sit on the fences, thousands of them, silent, watching the village with eyes that looked like wet pebbles. Eric grew pale. His voice, once a clarion call, became a raspy whisper. He told me he couldn't sleep. He said that every time he closed his eyes, he heard the sound of water, not the pleasant lap of the fjord, but the sound of heavy, sodden things dragging themselves out of the deep. Jarl, he whispered to me one morning, his hands shaking so hard he spilled his porridge. The saga, it's too heavy. I can feel the words pulling at the ground. I think I gave the dead a promise I can't keep. I laughed at him. I was a fool. You gave them fame, Eric. Every man wants to be remembered as a hero. No, Eric said, his eyes wide with a terror I didn't yet understand. I didn't give them fame. I gave them purpose. I told the world they were standing guard. And now, they've decided to start their shift. The first grave walker arrived on the night of the first frost. Old Bjorn was the lookout. He was a man who had seen 80 winters, a man who didn't frighten easily. But when we found him at dawn, he was catatonic. He was pointing toward the burial mounds at the edge of the woods, his finger frozen in a rigid hook. I went out there myself. The air was unnaturally still. And there, standing just outside the circle of the village's protective runes, was a man. At first, I thought it was a traveler. He was tall, wearing a tattered cloak that looked like it had been soaked in seawater for a century. But as I got closer, I saw the truth. He wasn't breathing. There was no mist coming from his mouth in the cold. His skin was the color of a fish's belly, translucent and blue-veined. It was Hakon. Hakon, who had been the first to run at Sundurvik. Hakon, whom Eric's song claimed had died holding the pass against 40 men. He didn't attack. He didn't growl. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on the longhouse. In his hand, he held a sword, but it wasn't a sword of steel. It was a sword made of solidified shadow, a blade that seemed to drink the morning light. He was waiting. By noon, there were 3 of them. By dusk, a dozen. They stood in a perfect semicircle around our village, silent and motionless. They were the men from the song. They were the cowards Eric had turned into kings. They had come home to claim the lives that the song said they were entitled to. We tried to fight them. Of course we did. Sigurd, our strongest warrior, charged Hakon with a great axe. He swung with the strength of a bear. The axe passed through Hakon as if he were made of smoke. But when Hakon moved a slow, ponderous swing of that shadow blade, it didn't cut Sigurd's flesh. It cut his memory. Sigurd dropped his axe. He looked at us, his friends, his family, and his eyes went blank. He didn't know his own name. He didn't know what a sword was. He wandered off into the woods, a hollow shell of a man, stripped of everything that made him a soul. That is the horror of the grave walkers, my friends. They don't want your blood. They want your truth. They are the manifestations of Eric's lie, and they have come to harvest the reality we traded for a pretty story. The village fell into a state of siege. We couldn't leave. The grave walkers stood like statues, their presence turning the very air into a thick, suffocating fog. Inside the walls, the lie began to eat us. People started forgetting things. Small things at first, the taste of an apple, the color of their mother's eyes. Then larger things, how to build a fire, how to love their children. The more we, heroically, remembered the battle in the song, the more of our real lives we lost. The lie was a sponge, and we were being squeezed dry. I found Eric in the cellar, surrounded by empty skins of mead. He was scratching runes into the dirt with his fingernails until they bled. "Fix it," I roared, grabbing him by the collar. "Sing a new song. Tell the truth. Tell them we were cowards. Tell them Hakon ran. Maybe they'll go back to the dirt if they don't have a legend to uphold." Eric looked at me, and I saw that he was already half gone. His skin was turning that same fish belly white. "It's too late, Jarl," he rasped. "A lie is like a nail driven into a tree. You can pull the nail out, but the hole remains. I gave the dead a destiny. I told the universe they were the eternal watchmen of Ravensvik. The universe believed me. Now, they must watch. And since there are no enemies left for them to fight, they have turned their gaze on us." He stood up, his movements jerky and stiff. "There is only one way to pay the debt. The song needs a new ending. A true ending." He walked out of the cellar, through the hall, and out into the center of the village. The grave walkers, nearly 50 of them now, all turned their heads in unison. The sound of their neck bones cracking was like the breaking of dry kindling. Eric began to sing, but it wasn't the beautiful, melodic voice of a skald. It was a harsh, rhythmic chanting. He told the truth. He sang of the salt stains on our tunics from the sea we fled. He sang of the way my hands shook when I ordered the retreat. He sang of the fear, the cold, and the glorious, mundane cowardice of men who just wanted to grow old. As he sang, the grave walkers began to change. They didn't vanish. They became solid. This is the part that no saga will ever record, for who would want to remember it? As the truth filled the air, the grave walkers grew heavy. Their translucent skin became gray stone. Their shadow blades turned into iron. They didn't go back to the graves. Instead, they began to walk into the village. But they didn't come to kill us. They came to replace us. For every truth Eric sang, one of us felt a piece of ourselves slip away. When he sang of Hakon's fear, the living Hakon, his nephew who looked just like him, collapsed. When he sang of the Jarl's retreat, I felt the strength leave my legs. The grave walkers were stepping into the roles the song had carved for them. They were becoming the heroes of Ravensvik, but in doing so, they were pushing the living into the shadows. We were becoming the ghosts. We were becoming the echoes of a story that had been told wrong. Eric reached the final verse, the part where the Skald himself dies to protect the secret. He looked at me, a single tear of blood running down his cheek, and he spoke the final word. The air exploded. A shockwave of pure, unadulterated fact tore through the village. When I woke up, the grave walkers were gone. Or rather, they were everywhere. Look around you tonight, my friends. Look at the men sitting in the shadows of this hall. Look at the way they sit, so still, so silent. Have you noticed that they never eat? Have you noticed that they never sleep? They are the heroes Eric created. They are the stone-fleshed husks of our brothers, finally living out the lie we commissioned. They protect us, yes. No raider will ever dare attack Ravensvik again, for who can kill an army that is already dead? We are the safest village in all the north. But the price, oh, the price. We, the living, have become the ghosts. We move through our own homes like smoke. Our children grow up without voices because the heroes do not speak, and the heroes are the ones who rule. We are tethered to them. We are the fuel for their legend. Eric is still here, too. He sits by the gate, his body turned to a pillar of salt and ash. He is the eternal chronicler. If you listen closely when the wind is high, you can hear his voice vibrating in the stone, forever repeating the lie, forever ensuring that the grave walkers stay solid. I am your Jarl. I am the man who bought a victory with a lie. And now, I sit in a hall of statues, waiting for the day when I, too, become part of the masonry. The fire is almost out now. Do you hear it? That thump drag. That isn't a grave walker. That is the sound of the truth trying to get back in. But it can't. The lie is too strong. The song is too well written. We are Ravensvik, the village of heroes. And we will be here, exactly like this, until the world itself ends and the gods demand to see our scars. But we have no scars, friends. We only have stories. Go to your beds. Sleep if you can. But if you dream, dream of something small. Dream of something ugly. Dream of something true. Because out here, in the dark, the truth is the only thing that can't find a home.